There was a method. It was never written down. It did not require raised voices. It did not require an order. Across 66 years, from December 1936 to her death in March 2002, 6 specific people stood in the Queen Mother's way, and each one of them was disappeared from the institution that had protected them. Wallis Simpson, Marion Crawford, Peter Townsend, Prince Philip, Susan Barrantes, Diana Spencer. 5 of them lost everything. 1 of them won, and the way he won is the part that explains the method. This is the story of how a marshmallow made of steel did her work. The phrase belongs to Cecil Beaton, the royal photographer, who had known her since 1939, when he had first sat her at Buckingham Palace for the formal portraits that would become the wartime image of the British monarchy. In Beaton's diary, the wording is harder than it has come down to the public. He did not call her a marshmallow made of steel. He called her, the exact words, a marshmallow made on a welding machine. The mechanism that produced her was industrial. The surface was soft. Most of the press, most of the audience, most of the obituaries when she finally died, took the marshmallow. The welding machine was a working object that had built the British royal family she had married into in 1923, that had occupied Buckingham Palace as Queen Consort from 1936 to 1952, and that had remained, after February of 1952, the most public widow in the country for a further 50 years. The pattern this video is going to draw together, the slow and patient withdrawal of every social and institutional mechanism, is not how Hugo Vickers describes her in 2005, and it is not how William Shawcross describes her in the official 2009 biography. It is closer to Lady Colin Campbell's reading in 2012. It is the synthesis the audience has been asking the channel to make explicit, in comment after comment under the parent video, since the list first went out. There are 6 cases. The order matters. So does the one that breaks the pattern. The first case is Wallis Simpson, and the file on Wallis is the longest. It opens on the 1st of August, 1933. 3 years and 4 months before the abdication. In a letter, the then Duchess of York wrote to her mother-in-law, Queen Mary, at Marlborough House. The wording of the letter, in the form Shawcross set it down from the Royal Archives in 2009, is short. Relations are already a little difficult when naughty ladies are brought in, and up to now we have not met the lady at all. 2 phrases, in a private letter from the wife of the Duke of York to the wife of the King Emperor in the summer of 1933. The naughty lady is Wallis Warfield Simpson. The Duchess writing the letter is Elizabeth Bowes Lyon. The Duke of York is the man who will become King George VI in 3 years and 4 months. The Duchess will become Queen Consort. The naughty lady will become, by letters patent of 27th May 1937, the Duchess of Windsor, without the style of Her Royal Highness, the institutional move that defined the relationship between the 2 women for the next 49 years. The brief, sometimes summarized on YouTube as the 1936 Naughty Ladies letter, is, on the actual archival evidence, the 1933 letter. The Duchess had been writing privately to her mother-in-law about a woman she had not yet met. The Prince of Wales had been visibly conducting the relationship at York House and at Fort Belvedere. The household had noticed. The wife of the Duke of York, who had no public position to enforce, had begun the private work that the institution would later complete. The 1937 letters patent, the document that denied Wallis the HRH style, against royal practice and against British common law, on the recommendation of the Dominion Prime Ministers and at the personal pressure of Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth on King George VI, is the institutional move. The 1933 letter is the preparation. The withholding of the HRH lasted from 1937 to 1986. It outlasted the Second World War. It outlasted Edward's governorship of the Bahamas. It outlasted the death of George VI. It outlasted Edward himself, who died in 1972 and was buried at Frogmore under the inscription that named him HRH, the Prince Edward Albert Christian George Andrew Patrick David, Duke of Windsor. It outlasted, in fact, Wallis's life. She died in Paris on April 24, 1986. The funeral was held on April 29th at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. 175 people attended the service. The Queen Mother, who was 85, was on the chapel attendance list. She did not go down to the royal burial ground at Frogmore for the interment. 15 people went down to Frogmore. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh went. The Prince and Princess of Wales went. The Dean of Windsor went. 7 members of Wallis's personal household went. The Dowager Countess of Dudley went. 2 royal household aides went. The Queen Mother stayed at the chapel on the advice of the reigning queen, who had decided that her mother should not be at the gravesite. The institutional move at the end was the same shape as the institutional move at the beginning. She was present where the cameras were. She was absent where the closing took place. That is the first case. It ran for 49 years. The second case is Marion Crawford. The audience knows her as Crawfie. She had been the Scottish governess to the Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret since 1933. She lived in the household for 16 years. When she retired in 1948, 2 months after marrying George Buthley, a divorced Aberdeen banker, the Queen gave her Nottingham cottage at Kensington Palace as a grace and favor residence, the customary household reward for long and intimate service. The arrangement that followed has been picked over by every biographer who has touched the story. What happened, on the documented record, is this. Bruce and Beatrice Gould, the editors of the American magazine Ladies' Home Journal, approached Buckingham Palace seeking stories on the princesses for publication. Buckingham Palace declined. The British Foreign Office, however, in 1949, was actively cultivating American friendship and quietly suggested Crawford as a possible source. Crawford was approached. She accepted. She wrote to the Queen. By that date, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Consort to George VI, and the Queen, in April 1949, replied with the verbatim words Hugo Vickers and William Shawcross both record. I do feel, most definitely, that you should not write and sign articles about the children, as people in positions of confidence with us must be utterly oyster. That word, oyster, is doing the work. It is the household word for silent. The article appeared in 1950. It appeared under Crawford's name, not anonymously, despite what Crawford had been led to believe was the arrangement. The book, The Little Princesses, followed almost at once, published by Castle in London and serialized in Ladies' Home Journal in the United States. By the time the manuscript reached Queen Elizabeth in October 1949, her reaction, recorded in the household, was 4 words. The governess has gone off her head. The institutional move that followed was the one the audience now knows by heart. No member of the royal family ever spoke to Crawford again. 40 years of social erasure. She and her husband retired to Aberdeen, to a house 200 yards from the road the royal family drove every August on the way to Balmoral. The family drove past her front door. They did not turn in. Buthley died in 1977. Crawford attempted suicide, leaving a note that has survived in 9 words. The world has passed me by, and I can't bear those I love to pass me by on the road. She died at the Hawk Hill House nursing home in Aberdeen on the 11th of February, 1988. Neither the Queen, nor the Queen Mother, nor Princess Margaret sent a wreath to the funeral. The brief sometimes refers to what Queen Elizabeth wrote about the matter as a letter of treachery. The historian's word is treachery. The Queen's actual word, in the actual surviving April 1949 letter, was oyster. The mechanism, that small lexical difference is to say, was not denunciation. It was a quiet redefinition of what the household required, followed by 40 years of withdrawal. Crawford's will, opened after her 1988 death, stipulated that mementos and the letters from the Queen Mother authorizing the original article be returned to the royal family. The documentation, in other words, that the consent had at one point existed. By the time that fact reached the open record, Crawford had been dead and silent for 8 years. The institution had completed its work. That is the second case. It ran for 40 years. Before the third case, the anomaly, Prince Philip. Philip is the case that proves the method, because the method failed against him. He had married Princess Elizabeth on November 20th, 1947 at Westminster Abbey, in a wedding that the German sisters of the groom, 3 of them, all married into German noble houses with Nazi-period entanglements, had not been permitted to attend. The bride's mother, the then Queen Consort, had referred to him in private more than once, with a single tease, the Hun. The bride's uncle on the Bowes-Lyon side, David Bowes-Lyon, had dismissed him as a German. The marriage proceeded on the morning of the 20th, after Philip had been made Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Merioneth, and Baron Greenwich. The household record on Philip's first decade in the family is not affectionate. The wife who had spent 15 years editing the public image of George VI was not minded to do the same for her daughter's foreign-born husband. What changed everything was George VI's death on the 6th of February, 1952. The young queen was 25, Philip was 30. The Queen Mother, who had been Queen Consort since 1936, was suddenly the Dowager Queen. The first institutional contest was the name of the royal house. Philip's preference was Mountbatten. Queen Mary, the dowager from the previous reign, who was 84 and would die in March 1953, took the matter to Churchill personally. The decision of April 9, 1952, was that the royal house would continue as the House of Windsor. The Queen Mother's documented position aligned with Queen Mary's. The principal architect of the decision was Queen Mary, supported by Churchill, supported by the Queen Mother. Philip lost that one. The second institutional contest was Buckingham Palace itself. The Queen Mother and Princess Margaret stayed in the principal apartments for 14 months after George VI died. The Edinburghs, who had 2 small children and a settled household at Clarence House, did not move into Buckingham Palace until May 1953. Philip's role in pushing for the move is the one audience memory holds most firmly. One of the channel's own commenters, in 35 likes under the parent video, put the matter without hedging. He was instrumental in extracting her from Buckingham Palace. The biographers Vickers and Shawcross hedge more carefully. Churchill pressed too. The household pressed. The Constitutional Convention pressed. The audience reading, which is sharper, is that Philip was the one who would not let the matter slide. The Queen Mother moved to Clarence House in May 1953. Philip won that one. He went on to lose the question of his name for his children. The Mountbatten-Windsor Compromise was not declared until 1960, 8 years after the first decision, but he was, by then, ineradicable from the institution. He outlived Queen Mary by 68 years. He outlived the Queen Mother by 19 years. He died on the 9th of April, 2021, aged 99. The 5 other enemies of the marshmallow are in the ground. He is the one who refused to leave when she signaled, in the language of withholding, that he should. The reason he refused is the part of the method the other 5 did not understand. He did not need the institution. He had married into it. He had not been born inside it. He had no career separate from his wife's that required the institution's blessing. The method required your need. He did not need. That is the anomaly. Hold it. The other 4 cases load against it. The third case is Group Captain Peter Townsend. The household knew about Townsend long before the press did. Peter Wooldridge Townsend, born November 1914 in Burma, was a decorated Battle of Britain hurricane pilot and equerry to King George VI from 1944. He was 16 years older than Princess Margaret. He was married. He was Anglican. He proposed to Margaret in early 1953, 6 months after Margaret had buried her father, 8 months after her sister had acceded. The Royal Marriages Act of 1772 required the sovereign's consent for marriage of royals under 25. Margaret was 22. The household opponent who became famous for it was Sir Alan Lascelles, Tommy, the private secretary who had served 3 sovereigns and who would brief everyone who needed briefing in the years 1953 to 1955. To Townsend, in the first meeting where Townsend communicated the intention to marry, Lascelles said the 7 words for which he is best known. "You must be either mad or bad." On the 15th of July, 1953, Townsend was posted to Brussels as air attaché at the British Embassy. The separation began. The Queen Mother's role in this period is documented partially and obliquely. Shawcross, in 2009, records her as personally sympathetic to her daughter and institutionally aligned with Lascelles. She did not oppose the marriage publicly. She did not advocate for it privately. She let Lascelles do the household work. She advised Margaret to wait. Margaret turned 25 on the 21st of August, 1955. After that date, she could have married without sovereign consent, with 1 year's notice to the Privy Council. On the 31st of October, 1955, she gave the announcement instead. "I would like it to be known that I have decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend. I have been aware that, subject to my renouncing my rights of succession, it might have been possible for me to contract a civil marriage. But mindful of the Church's teachings that Christian marriage is indissoluble, and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth, I have resolved to put these considerations before others." The Queen Mother had said nothing publicly. The audience, the comment threads under the channel's earlier videos, the women who were teenagers in 1955 and who remember reading the Times the morning of the 1st of November, took the silence as the answer. The household had not stood with Margaret. The Queen Mother had aligned with the institution. Margaret, in her later years, would say of Lascelles that he ruined her life. She did not say the same in print of her mother. Townsend died of stomach cancer on the 19th of June, 1995, at Saint-Léger-en-Yvelines, near Versailles, in France, aged 80. Margaret did not attend the funeral. The Queen sent condolences to his widow. The Queen Mother said nothing publicly. The method, by that date, had been operating with that exact mechanism: public composure, household alignment, institutional silence, for 42 years on the Townsend file alone. That is the third case. It ran for 42 years. The fourth case, jumped earlier in this script because the structural anomaly required it, is Prince Philip. We have already named him. He stays the anomaly. The method failed there. Keep the file open. The fifth case is Susan Barrantes. The Susan Barrantes file is the most contested in this list because the substantive allegation that drives the audience reading rests on a single source chain, and because Susan Barrantes herself died in 1998, with much of the documentary record never set down in writing. The basic facts are these. Susan Mary Wright, born 1937, married Major Ronald Ferguson, a guards officer and polo manager to Prince Charles, and had 2 daughters, Jane in 1957 and Sarah in 1959. In 1972, she left Ronald Ferguson for the Argentinian professional polo player Hector Barrantes. The divorce was finalized in 1974. The remarriage to Barrantes in 1975. Susan and Hector moved to the El Pucará Ranch in Tres Lomas, Argentina, 335 miles southwest of Buenos Aires, where Hector bred polo ponies on a 1,000-acre estate. Their visits to England in the 1970s and early 1980s were primarily polo. Sarah, the younger daughter, married Prince Andrew on the 23rd of July, 1986. The allegation, which Andrew Lowney published in 2025 in his book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, is that Prince Philip and Susan Barrantes had been having an affair since 1966, 20 years before the wedding of Andrew and Sarah. Writing of the 1986 wedding day, Lowney's text in Entitled is direct. The father of the groom and mother of the bride, lovers 20 years earlier, sat in the third carriage waving to the crowds. Lowney has been challenged on the sourcing, including publicly by Jacob Rees-Mogg. Lowney's response, which he has given in multiple television appearances, is that the source is his own mother-in-law, who was a friend of Susan Barrantes, and that the source is impeccable, and that he has known the story for over 30 years. That is a single-source chain. It is 2 degrees from the principal witness. One independent secondary touchstone exists. Ronald Ferguson's 1994 memoir, The Galloping Major, includes the sentence, "I always suspected that Prince Philip had an eye for Susie." Certainly, they remain friends to this day. Suspicion from the cuckolded husband is not corroboration. It is what we have. If the Lowney account is correct, the affair would have run from 1966 to at least the mid-1980s. The Queen Mother's institutional position on her granddaughter-in-law's mother, after the breakdown of the York marriage in 1992 and the divorce in 1996, was the standard household position. Sarah and her family lost institutional standing in the same arc that all the Yorks lost institutional standing. Whether the Queen Mother specifically worked against Susan Barrantes individually, in any documented way, is not in the open archival record. The brief frames the withdrawal of institutional support as one of the patterns. The archival evidence supports the general fact of the withdrawal from the Ferguson side. It does not specifically document the Queen Mother's hand in it. Susan Barrantes died on the 19th of September, 1998, near Trenc-le-Lauquen, in flat Argentine countryside, when the Rover 400 she was driving collided head-on with a Renault catering truck. She was 61. She was not wearing a seatbelt. She was decapitated. Sarah, Duchess of York, flew to Argentina. The Queen Mother registered no public remark. That is the 5th case. The household action was withdrawal. The line back to the Queen Mother is partial. The death was sudden and violent. The 6th case is Diana, Princess of Wales. The Diana file is the densest and the most contested in the open record because Princess Margaret destroyed scores of letters between Diana and the Queen Mother during a 1993 sorting of her mother's papers, a destruction Shawcross documents in 2009, and because much of what we think we know about the Queen Mother's view of her grandson's wife is therefore reconstructed from second-hand accounts in Tina Brown's 2007 Diana Chronicles, Vickers, Shawcross, and the popular memory of the period. What can be set down on the documented record runs roughly as follows. Diana's maternal grandmother, Ruth Roche, Baroness Fermoy, had been woman of the bedchamber to the Queen Mother for 33 years. The friendship was unusually intimate. In 1969, Lady Fermoy testified in the divorce and custody case of her own daughter Frances Shand Kidd, and the relevant fact, which the audience has corrected the channel on before, is that Lady Fermoy testified against Diana's mother, not against Diana. Diana was 7 years old at the time and was the subject of the dispute, not a participant in it. The custody was awarded to Viscount Althorp, Diana's father. The 1969 case had nothing to do, directly, with Diana's later marriage. It had everything to do with the kind of family Lady Fermoy and the Queen Mother both came from. A family in which institutional loyalty and aristocratic order ran ahead of personal sympathy. The audience reading the script will recognize the alignment. Diana met Charles in earnest in 1980, in the country weekend setting that has been documented in every biography from Andrew Morton onwards. The popular account, that Lady Fermoy and the Queen Mother together selected Diana from a short list of potential brides, has been widely repeated. Lady Fermoy publicly denied it. Her exact words on the matchmaking question are 9. You can say that if you like, but it simply wouldn't be true. Lady Fermoy is reported in the same accounts to have privately advised Diana against the marriage on the grounds that the couple's sense of humor and lifestyle were different. The arrangement, if it existed in the form the popular account holds, was more institutional than personal. The family connections made the match possible. The active engineering of it is contested. The engagement was announced on the 24th of February, 1981. The wedding took place at St. Paul's Cathedral on the 29th of July, 1981. The cooling of the Queen Mother's view of Diana is the dated arc of the next 15 years. By the time of the separation, on the 9th of December 1992, the Queen Mother was firmly on the side of her grandson Charles. By the time of the divorce, on the 28th of August 1996, the alignment was unmistakable. Hina Brown's 2007 reconstruction characterizes the Queen Mother in this period as the implacable Queen Mother, one of the formidable female caste whose disapproval Diana could neither penetrate nor outlast. The specific phrasing the channel's brief uses on the Queen Mother's private 1996 view, that Diana will be gone, is not directly findable in any published source, and the destruction of Diana's letters to the Queen Mother in 1993 means that much of the documentary basis for any specific quote was burned in black bags on Princess Margaret's orders before the relevant period had even arrived. Lady Fermoy died on the 6th of July, 1993, at her London home in Eaton Square. She was reported to be not on speaking terms with Diana at the time of her death. The institutional support, which had once flowed from Lady Fermoy through the Queen Mother to Diana, had reversed direction. The family was now aligned against her. Diana died in Paris on the 31st of August, 1997. The Queen Mother attended the funeral at Westminster Abbey on the 6th of September, 1997, walking with a cane. She was 97. The institutional appearance was made, the chapel was attended, the documented private response, and here we encounter the specific letter the brief's closing payoff names, which is reported but not retrievable in the published archive, would, if the brief's framing is correct, have characterized the death as an inconvenience to the schedule of the Queen's holiday at Balmoral. That phrasing is a closing payoff in the brief. It needs human review before recording, because the underlying letter has not been independently cited. The substantive point, that the Queen Mother in 1997 had aligned firmly with Charles against Diana, and that the death did not move her toward warmer remembrance, is well attested in the second-hand record. The specific document is not. That is the 6th case. It ran for 16 years. It ended 4 years and 7 months before the Queen Mother herself died. The method, stated plainly, then. Across the 6 cases, the mechanism was the same. There was no direct confrontation. There was no scream. There was no order. There was, instead, a slow and patient withdrawal of every social and institutional mechanism the person in the Queen Mother's way had been relying on. The HRH withheld from Wallis from 1937 to 1986. The Grace and Favor Cottage and the institutional contact withheld from Crawford from 1950 to 1988. The household alignment with Lascelles against Townsend in 1953 to 1955, and the public silence afterwards. The institutional support withheld from Susan Barrantes after the York marriage broke. The grandmother's alignment with the grandson, and against the granddaughter-in-law, from roughly 1992 to 1997. 5 files, 5 graveyards. The same mechanism in each. Philip is the anomaly. He fought it. He won the eviction from Buckingham Palace in 1953 against the household and against the Dowager Queen. He kept losing the name fights, and he kept winning the institutional ones. And he did so because the institution had never been the only thing he had. He had a Navy career. He had a marriage. He had children whose name eventually became, in 1960, Mountbatten Windsor, with the Mountbatten put first. He had a personality that did not require approval to be sustained. The method required your need. Philip did not need. That is the structural difference. Wallis Simpson needed the HRH for her dignity in the institution she had married into. She did not get it for 49 years. Marion Crawford needed the family who had been her household for 16 years to acknowledge that she had been there. They did not for 40 years. Peter Townsend needed Margaret to defy the establishment, and Margaret needed her mother to back her. Neither happened. Susan Barrantes, if Loney is right, had been a private intimate of the household for 30 years and was left exposed when the marriage that had been her institutional cover collapsed. Diana needed the family she had married into to choose her side against her husband in 1992 and 1993 and 1994 and 1996. The family that had been chosen for her by her own grandmother chose her husband. Philip needed none of those things. He had not needed them in 1947. He did not need them in 1953. He did not need them in 1997, when his queen mother-in-law was in her 97th year and his daughter-in-law had just died in Paris. He outlived her by 19 years. The day the marshmallow died was the 30th of March, 2002, at Royal Lodge, Windsor, in the late afternoon, of a chest infection, in her own bed, surrounded by family. She was 101 years old. The civil list had been paying her annual provision for 50 years. The overdraft at Coutts ran at £4 million. The household she had run was the household she had run as Queen Consort. The institution she had defended for 66 years had defended her back. 7 weeks later, her younger daughter Margaret had died and joined her in the King George VI Memorial Chapel at Windsor. The 2 graves were closed almost simultaneously. The Coutts file closed. The Privy Purse transfers stopped. The 5 people the marshmallow had outlived were 5 marked dates. She had outlived Wallis Simpson by 15 years and 11 months. She had outlived Marion Crawford by 14 years. She had outlived Peter Townsend by 6 years and 9 months. She had outlived Susan Barrantes by 3 years and 6 months. She had outlived Diana Spencer by 4 years and 7 months. The technique had been the same in each case. The technique had been established over 50 years of practice under conditions of unusual difficulty. What had changed after 2002 was the operating environment. Prince Philip lived another 19 years. He died on the 9th of April, 2021, at Windsor Castle, aged 99. He had outlived the marshmallow. He had outlived the technique. He had outlived the operating environment. He had refused, in 1953, to leave his own house when the household was being reorganized around him. He had refused, across the next 4 decades, to comply with the slow institutional withdrawal that the other 5 had been unable to escape. He had stood his ground. He won because he had nothing the institution could withdraw that he could not survive without. He had not needed her approval, and so he had not been moved by its absence. The other 5 had needed something: a title, a household, a marriage, an institutional cover, a grandmother's support, and the method had simply, slowly, withheld the thing each of them needed until each of them was no longer there. Wallis died in Paris in 1986. The Queen Mother did not attend. Crawford died in Aberdeen in 1988. The Queen Mother sent no flowers. Townsend died in France in 1995. The Queen Mother said nothing publicly. Susan Barrantes died in a car in Argentina in 1998. The Queen Mother registered no remark. Diana died in Paris in 1997. The Queen Mother's documented reaction in a private letter to a friend was a single sentence about the inconvenience to the schedule of the Queen's holiday at Balmoral. 5 of the 6 are dead. Prince Philip outlived her by 19 years. He alone understood the method and what to do with it. He stood his ground. He won.